Hey, hello there. Welcome back. If you watched the first video, my name is Mafalda, and in this video, I will be talking about the importance of being trauma informed in our world today. So let's jump right in. We know now that trauma is way more widespread than we once thought. So we used to associate the word trauma with a single traumatic event, like an accident, like witnessing somebody's death, for example. And we now know, thanks to Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who is, in my opinion, the leading neuroscientist in the field of trauma, who has decades and decades of research on the topic. We know this thanks to him. He was the one who introduced this idea that actually trauma can show up in many different ways, including developmental trauma, which is actually the result of compounding trauma. So it's not a single traumatic event, but consistent, continual exposure to psychological and emotional abuse has been shown to have very similar, or if not the same, effects, long-lasting effects and consequences on a person's nervous system, on their brain, on their psyche, basically. And so the symptoms, the effects are the same, even if the cause was not the same. And so what this means for us, is that most of us will come into contact with trauma in one way or another throughout our lives, and most likely in more than one way or another. So we'll either have experienced trauma ourselves, or we will come across loved ones, colleagues, coworkers, clients that have experienced trauma, or we might even just come into contact with it through generational trauma, which we now know is also widespread. So we will come into contact with it in one way or another. And that's why it's so important that we understand what it is and how to deal with it. Another reason why it's so important to know about trauma and to know how to address it is that healing is one of the biggest topics of the age we're living in. And that's why the words trauma and healing itself have become such buzzwords. So you just have to log into any social media platform to see that healing, personal growth have just become very commonplace. People talk about it a lot more. These concepts are part of the collective awareness in ways that they hadn't been decades or centuries ago. And so it's just more common. It is coming, and the reason being that it's coming to the surface. And this actually ties into something that I said in the introduction video that I'm going to say again. We are currently living in a very potent window for awakening and for transformation. And what happens in windows like this is that all that was underneath, all that was beneath the surface, comes up to be cleared, comes up to be dealt with, comes up to be healed. And so it just shows up more in our reality. We're paying attention more, and it's being shown more. It's being shown to us more. And that's just part of this process. So as it's all coming up, that's what the trauma is, right? That's what the healing is. It's like the trauma is hidden. It lives in our subconscious mind. It happens at the human level between the mental, the emotional, and the physical bodies, but it lives in the subconscious mind. So subconscious, we are unconscious of it. And that's why it needs to come to the surface. And that's why it seems like there's more of it. There's more talk of it. And that's why scientists like Dr. Bessel van der Kolk start to appear and start to show us, oh, wait, there's actually a lot more to this than we once thought. So it might seem like we're more traumatized in today's world, but it's just because we're finally looking at it. We're finally taking it on. We're finally caring about our healing. Which brings me to the third reason why I believe it's so important to be trauma informed in this society. And it is because we live in an era of awakening, of growth, of transformation. And so there's going to be a tendency to want to reach higher levels of awareness, higher levels of consciousness, more expansion, more peace, more fulfillment, more growth, more joy. And with that, there's going to be a tendency, and this is what I've observed in a lot of spiritual communities, new age communities, the personal development world, there's going to be a tendency to want to bypass the trauma work because honestly, it's not pleasant. It is uncomfortable to be mirrored back your deepest, darkest corners and the deepest, darkest corners of your psyche. It is unpleasant. It's not easy. So a lot of the time what's going to happen is, all this trauma, but we're going to transmute it. We're going to overcome it. We're going to come out the other side. And although this is all possible, and in fact, this is the work that I do, there has to be a strong foundation of self-love, self-honesty, and courage to be able to look at these things, because that's what trauma work is in essence. It's shadow work. It's finally sitting with all these bits of ourselves that were fragmented off, that were shunned, that were shamed, and that were deemed not good enough to be a part of us or of the image that we portray to the world. And so it is very important to understand that we cannot bypass trauma work. We cannot bypass shadow work. It is very important to understand trauma, how it plays out in our lives, how it plays out in the lives of others, and how it plays out in the collective. If we want to actually heal, actually transform, actually reach higher levels of consciousness, we also need to reach deeper levels of consciousness. And that's where Sarah El-Khaldi's work has been so useful to me, to be able to integrate certain psychological concepts and understand them within a spiritual framework. So if you have seen this happen, or if you yourself have been a part of this, and we all, most of us on a spiritual journey have had moments of spiritual bypassing in some way, shape, or form. It's a natural tendency, and it's a natural process of disillusionment that we go through if we're on a journey like this. But we need to remember and remind ourselves that there is no such thing as bypassing trauma work. Because if you have been through trauma, it will come back and it will run the show of your life behind the scenes without you realizing. And there's a real risk here that if you are expanding your level of awareness and you're coming into contact with and you're being exposed to content or information or wisdom that allows you to understand that there's a lot more to life than you once thought, there's a real risk of getting stuck at a certain level when you refuse to do the denser work. So those are three reasons. Those are three reasons that I feel it's really important to stay trauma informed in today's day and age. And I wanted to also remind you that this is exactly the work that I do. So I help people navigate trauma and also get past it if their goal is to actually awaken to their highest potential. But if the trauma and the wounding is running the show, then it will be very difficult for you to actually access or at least to sustain these higher levels of consciousness. You might be able to access them, you might be able to have a peak experience here and there, but you won't be able to transform your life. You won't be able to come to the level of embodiment where you become the living, breathing example of what it's like to transmute pain into gold, to transmute tragedy into treasure, or wounding into gifts, let's say. But it's really rewarding. And I want to just leave it at that by saying, yes, it can be a little bit scary. It can be a little bit daunting, and it'll require a lot of courage, and it's non-linear, but it's definitely worth it because you, first of all, you want to be able to experience more peace, more fulfillment, more joy in your life. You want to be able to have healthier relationships. And for that to happen, you must be present. You must be aware. And that's what trauma work allows us to do. It allows us to come into presence right here, right now, as opposed to living stuck in the past and just repeating unconscious reactions to events that are not even playing out right now. So we all want that. And it's definitely worth it. It's not easy, but I can guarantee you that it will bring a much, much deeper understanding of what life is about, of who you are, of what's playing out for other people. And in general, it'll help you come into a sense of power, because trauma takes that away from us, right? It takes away the sense that we have any sort of agency over our lives. And it allows us to come into sovereignty, which at the end of the day is the goal of any spiritual journey. So yes, I wanted to finish there to say that it's definitely worth it, and you will definitely see and feel the effects. And last thing actually is that trauma work is not in detriment to spirituality or a spiritual awakening or a spiritual journey. In fact, all these concepts have value in them, and when they are understood within the context of maturity, which means the context of paradox and the context of nuance, they can be integrated and they can be useful in their own ways and present wisdom in a way that will be helpful. So they're not opposing concepts. And that's what one of the things I see as well a lot is not knowing how to integrate holistically all the different concepts, be it in the psychology world, the science world, or the spiritual world, or the ascension community. So these are not in opposition to each other, and we can actually benefit a lot from understanding these different concepts at the different levels of awareness, or the different dimensions, the different planes that they come in. All right, I hope this was useful to you in some way. I will be going much deeper into trauma work, what it looks like, how to do it, how to address it, all the different perspectives, be it scientific and spiritual, in other videos. So if this resonates with you, do stick around, do like, subscribe, help me reach a wider audience. And if you are looking for more help, more support, more personalized guidance, then do check out my website. And you've got some information on there about the work that I do. So this is what I do. I help people and guide people through these processes of healing and awakening. So I'd be very happy to help you do that. It's what I'm passionate about. It's why I'm here. So if you need that, do check it out. And I will see you all very, very soon in the next video with a lot more goodies to share. Thank you. Have a lovely, lovely day.